Hi, Brianna. We're going to take a look at your aesthetics and control posting here. So, overview, we'll just take a look. We've got how deep first here. Looks like you've got everything well controlled, everything set up. Color balance is a bit off. It's a bit warm here. We'll talk a little bit about that. To hold or not to hold. Looks like you corrected that color balance there. Here we are. Equivalent exposures. This one we'll chat a little bit more about as well, what we're seeing there, and then you know better. You've got it all up there. So let's jump back up top here and take a look at what we have. So how deep? This is the aperture experiment. It's the second of the experiments. There's a reason we have these kind of in an order. I do that one second because it's sort of more of the sort of standard setup. Now it's okay that it's posted. I'm not, I didn't really need you guys to post it in any particular order, but hopefully you did it second in order, because it is helpful if you do the scenarios in the order in which I have them listed. So anyway, we have these up here. This is definitely orange. You've got the camera set at one white balance setting and the lighting set to another one. We want to be mindful of that. It looks like you found it and corrected it. Look at that. When you're looking at your images, if they look this color, we need to identify that really quickly and make a change, right? This is part of it. If you were to be mixing a color in your, in painting, and you were to put it on the canvas and you were to see, if you were hoping that it was, white, and it put it on the canvas and it was yellow, you'd go, wait, this is supposed to be white. So anyway, be mindful of that as you move forward, especially when you're trying to control the lighting. Now, as far as the experiment goes, you did it exactly perfect. It looks just like what you should. Getting a little bit of movement on your tripod, but that's to be expected. We could have done a little bit more with the composition. I think you might have done a little bit more with that, but these experiments tend to have a little bit less in terms of composition, because I'm asking you guys to focus more on the camera. You guys are thinking more and more about what's going on this end of the process rather than out here, and that just happens. Hopefully that will sort of clear itself up as you begin to become more comfortable with the controls of the camera and controlling the light and being able to render compositions and stuff. It really just takes time and training and experience, and you'll start to do it all, right? Like playing an instrument, you're not having to necessarily think about the music as much, or think about how to play, how to do your fingers on the the strings. You're feeling the music, you know what the notes are, you can kind of know how to configure your hands. And same thing with photography. It's a technical thing, but you get through that just by doing it over and over. So anyway, it's to be expected that the compositions get a little bit less inventive on these things, because these are more sort of experiment like. That said, I do appreciate that you're using this sort of directional lighting on this with some interesting shadows and that kind of stuff. To hold, now you're doing this exactly right. Again, you're doing it very well. Here we have the half a second, and you're not trying to compensate or make it steady, or trying to over stabilize the camera at a half a second. You're just going with it and using the energy that you get from that movement to try to make an image that feels like it's active. And I think you've got it fairly well rendered here. I mean, these aren't meant to be images that are super tack sharp. They're meant to be images that take advantage of this sort of energy and movement. Even at a 15th of a second, you're going to get that. Now, the 15th of a second is going to be awkward because it's not quite slow enough to get that cool movement, but it's really not fast enough to hand hold. It's supposed to teach you that there are these sort of mid-ground areas that are really tough, and maybe help you understand that that's one maybe you want to avoid, or maybe one that is really tricky and that you know is going to be a problem if you ever get into doing it. I think your compositions on these are much better than the other ones, only because it seems like you're more free with these. You're off the tripod and that kind of thing. I tend to see a little bit more personality in some of these. Than in the more experiment type of images. It doesn't mean that the experiment type images couldn't have had more personality to them, but you can tell when students are a little bit more free to sort of do what they want, and that the images reflect that. Get a little bit of coffee there before I have a cough. With the cooler weather, I tend to have a little bit more of a drier throat. Equivalent exposures. Now, this is sort of a math problem. You either got the solution right or not right. So here we are, a 10th at 5.6. Now, on the handout, we had the 60th at F8, where we started off, and then we had you bumping up by a certain number of steps. And so I'm not sure where we got to a 10th at 5.6. You can see what you've done here is you have increased the amount of time, because by going from a 60th to a 30th to a 10th, which isn't really even a whole step, it would have been a 30th to a 15th would have been the next step. But by doing that, you're extending more time, right? But you held at the same aperture. So what's going on? This is actually something to learn. It's not correct. What we wanted to do was compensate as we went, but you can still learn something from this. So we have a 60th at F8. Then you went to F8. Then you went to a 30th at 5.8. So what we did here is you went with more time, right? Longer amount of time, and 5.6, which means more open aperture. So not only did you extend more time, you extended more light, right? A 30th is more time than a 60th, right? If you divide something into 60 parts and you divide something into 30 parts, which parts are bigger? If you divide something into only 30 parts, the 30 parts are bigger, right? That's how you think of it. So 5.6 is a ratio. So 5.6 is a bigger opening. So you not only gave it more time, but you also gave it more light. So that's why this image is darker than this image. That makes sense? So then we held at 5.6, right? Still left that, and then we gave it even more time. And look what the consequence is, right? What happens? It got lighter still. So anyway, you can see what's happening. So even though we got the problem wrong, it was an incorrect solution that you got here, we could still learn something from it because visually you can see what's happening. I want to explain that so that you can see, oh, look what happens when I give it more light and I don't compensate by restricting the intensity of the light. It just keeps getting brighter. The opposite will happen if you go the other direction. If you get darker, less time, it's just if you restrict the amount of light coming through and you give it less time, it's just going to continue to get darker. So here we have a 30th at 22, a 30th at 22. So technically these should be the same image, right? But something changed. What changed? It looks like maybe the light changed. So I'm not exactly sure what's happening here. Now we have a 15th at 22. This is more time, correct? And the aperture stayed the same, but it's more time. So therefore you're getting a brighter image. That's the consequence. So you're learning something from this clearly, but you're not getting the equivalent exposures. The idea was to move the time in one direction, the aperture in the other direction, so that the images, even though you're, excuse me, there's the cough. even though the exposures are different, you're getting a different aperture, a different shutter speed, that the images are going, that they look the same. This is to teach you this principle. I mean, I'm telling you about it, and we can see the sort of incorrect sort of consequence of it. But this was the lesson here, and we didn't quite get it right. And that's okay. These are tough things. It happens. Um, these aren't meant to be things that are easy. They are a challenge. But we can decide whether we want to try to resubmit this one or not. We may not have to. We'll look at what your grades are later on and decide, oh, let's go ahead and redo that one. Or maybe we know, your grade's not going to suffer so much if we don't redo it. So we'll chat about that when the time comes. Probably right after Thanksgiving break, we'll take a look and see, if we need to resubmit that one or not. I would have you hold off to resubmit that one to see where we are. You know better. Okay, so you know better is just your opportunity to explore, right? And I'm not really sure we're exploring too much here. We've got duplicate images. I like that you're putting in your information. I really do appreciate that. It's showing me that you're paying attention to that kind of stuff. You're indicating that. That's all very good. It's all very good. But where I'm maybe thinking that you're not quite clear on the instructions, and so maybe we just need to clarify that a little bit more. Please feel free to ask me questions. I know I tend to sort of hover in the middle of the room because I don't want to be over the top of you guys when you're shooting. I really want you to have the freedom to explore, problem solve, that kind of thing. I'm always there though to answer questions, and and don't feel embarrassed if you have a question. This is tough stuff. College level photography is no different than college level anything. It's hard. It's a 200 level class, so it is introductory in a way, but introductory college is still tough. So just ask me questions. I will be more than happy to help you through some of these instructions, even if you think, oh, this seems straightforward. Everybody else seems to be getting it. Don't worry about that. Let's just chat. We'll figure that out. Because this one was your chance to just kind of explore and have fun. So it looks like you kind of gave yourself some rules where there wasn't rules. That said, I think the images look quite interesting. This is a very nice composition using the entire picture plane, all of that. Your focus is tack sharp. All of that stuff looks good. It's a quite accomplished image. We get yellow here. We talked about that a little bit. Your exposures are fluctuating here. That said, the quality of light you got going underneath there looks really nice. You've got some good things going on here. I don't mean to, to frighten you or anything, like, you're or upset you by thinking that you did a poor job on the project. You had some missteps, clearly. You probably knew that when you were posting it, like, these things don't quite seem right yet. And that's okay. I mean, it's a project, and you're not going to get everything right every single time. That's what learning's all about. That said, you're doing some really good things with your photography here. You're making the right steps forward. And without making a couple of errors, you're not learning. So let's keep going forward. We'll take a look at where we are right after Thanksgiving, see if we need to resubmit anything. And if we do, you'll have plenty of opportunity to do that and be able to make up for any shortcomings you feel like you have. All right. Well, we'll see you in the studio. Bye-bye now.